My husband sold my family's mansion to his mistress for $1. He thought I'd crumble, maybe cry, definitely disappear quietly like the passive wife he'd married. Instead, I smiled and let him celebrate. Because while he'd spent 6 months planning his fraud, I'd spent 3 months documenting every detail. And the FBI was already watching. Sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the most dangerous one. This is how I won. I was selecting heirloom tomatoes at Greenfield Market when Savannah Clemens cornered me between the organic produce and the artisan cheese display. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her heels clicked against the polished concrete floor like a countdown timer, and she held a manila folder above her head like a trophy. Claire. Her voice carried across the entire market, designed for maximum audience. I wanted to thank you personally. I kept examining tomatoes, feeling their weight, checking for firmness. The same way I'd done every Saturday for 12 years. My hand stayed steady even as my heart recognized the moment I'd been preparing for. Thank you for the mansion, she continued, loud enough that Mrs. Patterson dropped her reusable shopping bag. $1 was incredibly generous of you. She pulled papers from the folder, fanning them out like a winning poker hand. A deed transfer. County stamps. Notary seals. And there, at the bottom, my signature. Except it wasn't my signature. It looked like someone had tried to forge my name while riding a roller coaster during an earthquake. Through the market's glass front, I could see my husband, ex-husband, though the papers weren't filed yet, sitting in Savannah's white Range Rover. Austin Finbar, the man I'd married 13 years ago in my grandmother's garden. He stared straight ahead, refusing to meet my eyes even through tinted glass and 30 feet of distance. I placed a tomato in my basket. Then another. The moving truck comes Monday, Savannah said, stepping closer. She smelled like expensive perfume trying to cover cigarette smoke. Austin says you'll cooperate. Says you're not the type to make a scene. Derek Morrison, the market owner, emerged from the back room carrying a crate of fresh herbs. He'd known me since I was 16, had given me my first job bagging groceries the summer my grandmother got sick. His weathered face shifted from confusion to concern as he took in the scene. Everything all right, Claire? Just fine, Derek. I moved to the heirloom carrots, their tops still fresh and green. Savannah was explaining how she bought my house. Bought? Derek's bushy eyebrows rose. But you just ordered those custom shelves for the library renovation. For $1, Savannah interrupted, thrusting the papers toward him. Legal and binding. Austin handled all the paperwork while Claire was distracted. Distracted. That's what she called the week I'd spent in Boston settling my late aunt's estate. The aunt who'd left me her art collection, which I'd been cataloging and preparing for auction. The trip Austin had encouraged me to take. Go, he'd said, kissing my forehead. I'll handle everything here. He'd handled it, all right. I loaded my basket methodically. Tomatoes, carrots, the fresh basil Derek had just brought out, a bunch of kale still damp from washing. Normal Saturday shopping while my world was supposedly ending. Austin's waiting, Savannah said, checking her phone. We have a meeting with the interior designer at 2. I'm thinking we'll get the library first. All those dusty old books, such a waste of space. I'm envisioning a meditation room. Very zen. Very now. The library. Where my grandmother had taught me to read. Where every book had a memory, a moment, a piece of our family history spanning 4 generations. Where I'd proposed to Austin, surrounded by first editions and the smell of aged paper. Derek was watching my face carefully, probably expecting tears or anger. Instead, I smiled. Not a bitter smile or a forced one. A real smile that touched my eyes and made Savannah's confident expression flicker with confusion. That's an interesting vision, I said, handing Derek my basket. Very ambitious. You're taking this well. Savannah's perfectly microbladed eyebrows drew together. Austin said you'd be difficult. That you'd need time to accept reality. Reality. I pulled out my credit card, my own card, in my own name, linked to accounts Austin knew nothing about. Reality is subjective, don't you think? I paid for my groceries while Savannah stood there, papers still in hand, waiting for the breakdown that wouldn't come. Derek bagged my items slowly, his eyes asking questions I couldn't answer yet. See you next Saturday, Derek. You sure about that, Claire? His voice carried weight beyond the simple question. Absolutely certain. I walked past Savannah, past her expensive perfume and fraudulent papers, past the white Range Rover where Austin still couldn't meet my gaze. My 12-year-old Volvo waited 3 spaces down, reliable and unremarkable. Just like everyone thought I was. The drive home took 11 minutes. I'd made this trip thousands of times, past the Henderson estate where I'd learned to ride bikes, around the curve where the old oak tree marked the property line, up the hill that revealed the valley where Riverside's old money built their legacies in brick and stone. And there it was. The Whitmore mansion. My grandmother's house. My mother's house. My house. 3 stories of Georgian architecture, built in 1886 by my great-great-grandfather with railroad money. 12 bedrooms. 7 bathrooms. A library that held 4,000 books. Gardens that had been featured in architectural magazines. History that couldn't be bought for any price, let alone $1. My phone buzzed before I could get out of the car. Mallory Chen, my best friend since law school. The text was simple, just heard. Coming over. Then another buzz. Jack Dunphy, the estate attorney who'd handled my grandmother's will, we need to talk. Today. And finally, the confirmation I'd been waiting for, Agent Poole, FBI. Attorney Dunphy's referral received. Documentation reviewed. Investigation active. Maintain normal behavior. I sat in my car, looking at the house that 4 generations of Whitmore women had protected, improved, and loved. The house Austin thought he could steal with forged papers and a dollar bill. He had no idea what he'd actually done. Sometimes the biggest mistake a thief makes is assuming everyone else is as dishonest as they are. Austin had spent 6 months carefully planning his fraud. I'd spent 3 months carefully documenting it. And now the FBI was involved. Mallory arrived before I'd finished unpacking groceries. She didn't knock, hadn't knocked since we were roommates at Columbia Law 15 years ago. She burst through the kitchen door, designer briefcase in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other, her black hair still perfectly styled despite the humidity. Please tell me Savannah Clemens is lying. She set the wine on the marble counter my grandmother had imported from Carrara. Please tell me Austin didn't actually. He did. I placed tomatoes in the ceramic bowl that had been my great-grandmother's. Or tried to, anyway. Mallory's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and finally settled on the calculating expression that made her one of Boston's top corporate attorneys. Start from the beginning. All of it. So I did. The Whitmore mansion came to me the day my grandmother died, 5 years ago. Not through her will, that came later, but through a private trust she'd established when I was born. My mother had been the previous beneficiary, but she'd passed when I was 12. Cancer, quick and cruel. This house has been protected by Whitmore women for 138 years, my grandmother had told me on her deathbed, her papery hand gripping mine with surprising strength. Your great-great-grandfather built it for his wife with the promise that it would pass through the female line, mother to daughter, grandmother to granddaughter. Never to be sold. Never to be divided. Always to be protected. She'd made me promise. And I'd kept that promise, even when Austin started suggesting we liquidate assets to fund his tech startup dreams. Austin Finbar. I'd met him at a charity gala when I was 29 and finally emerging from the grief of losing my grandmother. He was charming, ambitious, working in financial consulting. He loved the mansion's history, claimed to respect its legacy. We married in the garden on a June afternoon that felt like a beginning. For the first 5 years, it was good. He supported my work at the Riverside Historical Society. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I supported his career moves. We hosted dinner parties in the formal dining room, Christmas gatherings that filled every room with family and friends. We talked about children someday, about growing old in these rooms the way my ancestors had. Then his startup failed. The one he'd invested our savings into without telling me. The one that collapsed owing investors $200,000. It's just a setback, he'd said, pacing the library where I'd found the empty savings account statement. We'll rebuild. Maybe take out a loan against the house. No. The word came out harder than I'd intended. The house is in trust. It can't be used as collateral. That's when things shifted. Subtle at first. Comments about how the mansion was too much house for two people. How we could live so much more simply if we sold it. How I was being sentimental about bricks and mortar. It's not just bricks, I tried to explain. It's 4 generations of history. My mother's childhood bedroom. My grandmother's library. The garden where your family hosted parties for people who've been dead for decades, he'd said, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. Claire, you're living in a museum. It's not healthy. 6 months ago, he took a job in financial consulting at Clemens & Associates. New start, he'd said. Better money, better opportunities. I'd been happy for him. Relieved, even. The financial stress had been wearing on us both. What I didn't know was that Clemens & Associates was owned by Savannah Clemens's father. That Austin's late nights at the office were actually late nights at Savannah's downtown loft. That they'd been planning this for months. The Boston trip, Mallory said, her lawyer brain already assembling the timeline. He pushed you to go. Encouraged, supported, practically packed my bags. I pulled out the folder I'd hidden under the sink, behind the cleaning supplies where Austin never looked. My Aunt Patricia left me her art collection. 17 pieces, including 2 original Georgia O'Keeffes and a Winslow Homer. Worth approximately $3.2 million. Mallory's eyes widened. He knew. He knew. He also knew I'd need at least a week to catalog everything, meet with auction houses, handle the estate paperwork. I spread documents across the kitchen island. What he didn't know is that I asked Jack Dunphy to monitor any unusual activity on property records while I was gone. Jack had called me on day 4 of my Boston trip. Claire, someone requested a title search on the mansion. Filed under your name, but the signature doesn't match your notarized documents on file. That's when I'd understood. While I was in Boston, Austin was planning to forge my signature and transfer the deed. The mansion he couldn't access through normal channels, he'd simply steal through fraud. I came home after 1 week, I continued. Didn't tell him. Parked 3 blocks away and stayed at Mallory's apartment. Where you've been sleeping for 3 weeks, Mallory finished. While letting Austin think you were still in Boston. While documenting everything he did. Every forged signature he practiced. Every meeting with Savannah. Every piece of evidence that would hold up in federal court. Because that's what this was now. Not just a divorce. Not just a property dispute. Federal wire fraud. Forgery. Conspiracy to commit theft of property valued over $1 million. The mansion's conservative appraisal was $4.8 million, though its historical value was incalculable. The FBI, Mallory said quietly. You went to the FBI. Jack went to the FBI 3 weeks ago, after I showed him the security footage. Agent Mark Poole, White Collar Crime Division. He's been building the case while Austin thought he was getting away with it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, celebration party tonight. Savannah's penthouse. You should come see what we're planning for your mansion. Austin, taunting me from Savannah's phone. Inviting me to watch them celebrate stealing my family's legacy. I showed Mallory the text. She smiled slowly, the way she did right before destroying an opponent in court. Please tell me the FBI is invited too. They wouldn't miss it for the world. I returned to the mansion at dawn, using the key Austin didn't know I still had. My key, to my house, that he'd tried to steal. The irony wasn't lost on me. The front door opened silently. I'd oiled the hinges myself 6 months ago, and I stepped into the foyer where morning light filtered through the original stained glass windows. Everything looked the same. The Persian runner my grandmother had bought in Tehran in 1962. The grandfather clock that had kept time for 4 generations. The portrait of my great-great-grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, watching over her domain with knowing eyes. But something felt different. Violated. I found the evidence in my office. Austin's desk, the one I'd given him when he started working from home, had been ransacked. Drawers hung open, files scattered across the floor. He'd been looking for something specific. The original deed, probably. The trust documents. Anything that proved the house was truly mine. What he didn't know was that Jack Dunphy held all the originals in his office safe, and had for 5 years. Claire. I spun around. Austin stood in the doorway, dressed for work in the charcoal suit I'd bought him for his birthday. He looked tired, his usually neat hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. You weren't supposed to be here, he said. Not an apology. An accusation. It's my house. I kept my voice level. Where else would I be? Savannah said you were at the market yesterday. That you seemed fine. He stepped into the office, and I noticed he was wearing different shoes. Expensive ones. Italian leather that cost more than our monthly mortgage used to. I am fine. That's not normal, Claire. He moved closer, and I caught a whiff of perfume that wasn't mine. Savannah's signature scent, the one that cost $400 a bottle. Most women would be upset. Angry. Something. Should I be? His jaw clenched. That tell he had when he was frustrated, when things weren't going according to plan. We need to talk. About the house, about us, about moving forward. Moving forward. I leaned against my desk, the solid mahogany my grandmother had used to manage the household accounts, write letters to congressmen, organize charity events. That's an interesting phrase. I'm leaving you, Claire. He said it like ripping off a bandage, fast and sharp. For Savannah. We're together now, and the house is already sold. $1, filed yesterday at the courthouse. He pulled papers from his briefcase. The same papers Savannah had waived at the market, now with additional documents clipped behind. A deed transfer. A quitclaim. A notarized statement claiming I'd agreed to the sale in exchange for debt forgiveness. What debt? I wanted to ask. But I knew. The debt from his failed startup, the one I'd never agreed to be responsible for. You can't sell what isn't yours, Austin. It's done. He slid the papers across the desk. Community property laws. My name is on the tax documents, the insurance, the utility bills. I have just as much right to this house as you do. The confidence in his voice was almost impressive. He really believed it. Believed that 13 years of marriage and his name on some bills gave him the right to steal my family's 138-year legacy. When did you plan this? I asked, genuinely curious. Does it matter? Humor me. He sighed, checked his watch, a Rolex I'd never seen before, another gift from Savannah probably. About 6 months ago. After the startup failed, I realized I was never going to make real money on my own. But you, he gestured around the office, at the mansion beyond. You were sitting on millions in real estate, being sentimental about dead relatives and dusty books. So you decided to take it. I decided to be practical. He straightened his tie. Savannah understands ambition. She doesn't cling to the past like it's a security blanket. She's forward-thinking, dynamic. Does she know the house is worthless to you? That stopped him mid-sentence. What? The trust. The one my grandmother established when I was born. I pulled out my phone, opened the PDF Jack had sent me 3 weeks ago. The Whitmore Family Trust, irrevocable and binding. The mansion can only be owned by direct female descendants of Eleanor Whitmore. It cannot be sold, cannot be used as collateral, cannot be transferred to anyone outside the bloodline. Austin's face went pale. I thought Richard's lawyers could challenge it. Challenge an irrevocable trust established in 1886. You knew it existed, Austin. You just thought you could steal around it. You're lying. Jack Dunphy is the trustee. Call him yourself. He pulled out his phone, then stopped. Even if that's true, I still filed the paperwork. It's going to cost you thousands in legal fees to undo it, drag you through courts for months. Or, I turned to face him, you could be charged with fraud. Forgery. Conspiracy to commit theft of property valued over $1 million. The blood drained from his face completely now. You can't prove. I can prove everything. I walked to my desk, pulled out my own folder. The one I'd been building for 3 weeks. The practice signatures I found in your car. The text messages between you and Savannah planning the sale. The emails to her father's law firm asking about property transfer procedures. The security footage from Jack's office showing you trying to access the trust documents. Austin grabbed the edge of the desk. Claire, wait. We can work this out. I made a mistake, I panicked after the startup. Agent Poole would love to hear that confession. Who? FBI. White Collar Crime Division. He's been documenting your fraud for 3 weeks. The silence that followed was profound. Outside, birds sang their morning songs, oblivious to the implosion happening in the office. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking time the way it had for over a century. Tonight, I said quietly, you and Savannah are throwing a celebration party. Penthouse downtown, I believe. 8 o'clock. How did you? I'll be there. So will the FBI. So will reality, Austin. The kind you can't forge or steal or charm your way out of. I walked past him, through the foyer, toward the front door. Behind me, I heard him sink into a chair, the leather creaking under his weight. Claire. Lock the door when you leave, I said without turning around. And Austin? Don't come back. This house has survived wars, depressions, and family tragedies. It'll survive you too. The door closed behind me with a soft click, final as a period at the end of a sentence. My phone rang while I was ordering a latte at Sterling's, the cafe where I'd spent countless mornings working on historical society projects. The name on the screen made my stomach drop, Meredith Finbar. Austin's sister, who'd been my friend before she was family. I let it ring through to voicemail, but she called again immediately. Then again. Answer it, Mallory said from across the table, where she'd spread out legal documents like a general planning a battle. She deserves to know what her brother's done. On the 4th call, I answered. Meredith. Claire, thank God. Her voice was tight with stress. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. Austin called me last night, said you're having some kind of breakdown. That you're making wild accusations about him and Savannah, refusing to accept the divorce. Is that what he told you? He said you threatened him. That you're not being rational about the house sale, that you need professional help. She paused. Claire, I know divorce is hard, but you can't just. Meet me at the mansion. 1 hour. Bring your laptop. I don't think that's. Meredith, I'm going to show you exactly who your brother is. If you still think I'm having a breakdown after that, I'll accept whatever judgment you make. Silence stretched across the line. Meredith and I had been close once. She'd been my maid of honor, helped me care for my grandmother in her final months, stood beside me at the funeral. But family loyalty ran deep, and Austin was her baby brother. 1 hour, she finally said. But Claire, if you're really struggling, I can help you find someone to talk to. 1 hour. Come alone. I hung up before she could respond. Risky, Mallory observed. She might warn him. She won't. Meredith's a lot of things, but she's not dishonest. If I show her proof, she'll believe it. 45 minutes later, Meredith's silver Audi pulled into the circular driveway. She emerged wearing her hospital administrator uniform. She'd left work early, then. Her blonde hair was pulled back in the same efficient ponytail she'd worn since college, her face carefully neutral. I met her at the door. No hug, no greeting. Just, follow me. In the library, I'd set up my laptop on the reading table where my grandmother used to help me with homework. Mallory stood by the window, present but silent. A witness. Sit down, Mare. She sat, her hands folded in her lap, preparing for whatever intervention she thought this was. Claire, Austin's worried about you. We all are. He said you've been acting paranoid, that you won't sign the divorce papers, that you're claiming the house can't be sold when. 3 months ago, I interrupted. After Austin started talking obsessively about selling the mansion, I installed security cameras throughout the house. Her eyebrows rose. You never mentioned. Austin didn't know either. After his startup failed and he started fixating on liquidating the property, I wanted to protect my family's legacy. I opened the laptop, pulled up the first video file. This is from May 15th. 2 weeks before he convinced me to go to Boston. The video showed Austin in this same library, on the phone. I turned up the volume. No, she won't sign anything, Austin's recorded voice said. The trust documents are real. I found copies in her grandmother's papers. But there has to be a way around it. A pause as he listened to whoever was on the other end. I don't care if it's illegal, Savannah. I've been married to her for 13 years. I've earned this house. Meredith's face went white. There's more, I said, opening another file. May 23rd. The day before I left for Boston. This video showed Austin at my desk, practicing my signature. Over and over, comparing his attempts to my actual signature on documents he'd pulled from the filing cabinet. The concentration on his face was almost comical, like a student studying for an exam. Oh my God, Meredith whispered. May 28th. Another video. Austin and Savannah in the foyer, her arms around his neck, kissing in front of my great-great-grandmother's portrait. We'll have this whole place to ourselves soon, Savannah's voice carried clearly. Think of the parties we'll throw. The mansion Savannah Finbar has a nice ring to it. She's not even keeping your family name, Austin said, laughing. She wants to rename it Clemens Manor. Her father's paying for the renovations. I opened file after file. Austin meeting with a notary who didn't ask for my ID. Austin forging my signature on the deed transfer. Austin and Savannah celebrating with champagne in my kitchen, toasting to new beginnings and stupid, sentimental wives. That last one broke something in Meredith. She stood abruptly, walked to the window, her shoulders shaking. How long? She asked without turning around. 6 months, as far as I can tell. Maybe longer. He called me 3 days ago. Said you were unstable, that you'd threatened to destroy his relationship with Savannah out of spite. Her voice cracked. I believed him. I thought you were being vindictive, holding on to the house just to hurt him. I know. He's my brother, Claire. I've known him his whole life. How did I not see? She turned around, tears streaming down her face. What else did he do? I pulled out the financial documents. Bank statements showing Austin had been funneling money from our joint account into a separate account with Savannah's name on it. $47,000 over 6 months. Money from my salary at the Historical Society, from the stipend the trust provided for mansion maintenance, from my aunt's estate settlement. He's been stealing from you, Mallory said quietly. Not just the house. Cash, assets, anything he could access. Meredith sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. He asked me for money 2 months ago. Said you'd cut him off, that that you were being controlling about finances. I gave him $10,000. That's in the account too, I said, showing her the deposit. May 30th, deposited the same day. I helped him steal from you. Her voice was barely a whisper. You didn't know. I should have. She looked up at me, her eyes red. You were my friend first, Claire. Before Austin, before the wedding, you were my friend. And I chose to believe him over you without even asking for your side. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11. Outside, a gardener was trimming the hedges my grandmother had planted 40 years ago, the ordinary maintenance of an extraordinary place. There's something else you should know, I said. The FBI is investigating. They've been building a case against Austin and Savannah for 3 weeks. Tonight, there's a celebration party at Savannah's penthouse. I got an invitation, Meredith said. Austin wanted the whole family there to support his new beginning. I was planning to go, to try to talk to you if you showed up, to convince you to get help. She laughed bitterly. God, I'm such an idiot. You're not an idiot. You're loyal. He used that against you, the same way he used my love against me. Mallory's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then at me. Agent Poole. The party's confirmed for tonight. He wants to know if you're still willing to attend. Meredith looked between us. You're going? To watch them celebrate stealing your house? I'm going to watch them get arrested, I corrected. And I need you to be there too. As a witness. As family. As someone who can testify that you believed Austin's lies until you saw the evidence. Testify? Claire, this is going to trial? Federal court. Wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit theft. Austin's looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted. The color drained from Meredith's face again. He's my brother. I know. But what he did, she stood, walked to the bookshelf where our wedding photo still sat, dust gathering on the frame. She picked it up, studied the younger versions of us, then set it face down. What he did was unforgivable. Jack Dunphy's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian on Riverside's Main Street. He'd practiced here for 40 years, handling estates, trusts, and family law for old money families who valued discretion over flash. The waiting room smelled like leather and old books, comforting in its permanence. Claire. He emerged from his office, tall and silver-haired at 68, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd had a hip replacement last year. And Meredith. This is unexpected. She knows everything, I said. She needs to hear the rest. Jack's expression shifted from surprise to understanding. He'd been my grandmother's attorney for 30 years before becoming mine. He knew about loyalty, about family, about the weight of legacy. Come in. Both of you. His office was organized chaos, files stacked on every surface, law books bristling with colored tabs, but he could locate any document within seconds. He pulled 3 folders from his desk drawer, each labeled with dates. I've been tracking Austin's activities since you asked me to, 3 months ago. He opened the first folder. It started with small things. Requesting copies of property tax records. Asking the county clerk about deed transfer procedures. Nothing illegal yet, just concerning. He spread documents across his desk. Then in April, he contacted a notary service in Springfield. Not local, deliberately out of town. He requested information about remote notarization, specifically about what identification would be required to notarize a deed transfer. Remote notarization, Mallory said, her lawyer brain immediately grasping the implications. So he could forge Claire's signature without her being present. Exactly. The notary, thankfully, was suspicious. She contacted me because I'm listed as the trustee on all Whitmore property documents. I told her any legitimate transfer would go through my office, and to refuse any requests from Austin Finbar. Jack opened the second folder. That's when things escalated. 2 weeks later, a different notary service, this one in Providence. Same questions, different approach. He told them his wife had mobility issues and couldn't travel to sign documents. Mobility issues, I repeated, anger finally cracking through my calm. I run 5 miles every morning. He was establishing a pattern, Jack continued. Testing different notaries, refining his story, looking for someone who wouldn't ask questions. He found one in Hartford. A notary named Dennis Blake who operates out of a UPS store and has been flagged before for questionable practices. He pulled out a document I recognized, the deed transfer Savannah had waived at the market. Blake notarized this on June 8. The same day you were in Boston meeting with auction houses about your aunt's art collection. But I was in Boston, I said. How did he? He didn't need you there. That's the whole point. Blake never verified your identity because you were never present. Austin showed him a driver's license he'd fabricated using your old photo and his signature practice, paid him $500 in cash, and Blake stamped it without question. Meredith made a sound between a gasp and a sob. That's identity theft. That's multiple federal crimes, Jack confirmed. Identity theft, wire fraud, he used email to communicate with the notary, forgery, and conspiracy. Conspiracy? I asked. With Savannah? With Savannah, her father, and potentially others. Jack opened the third folder, the thickest one. This is where it gets complicated. Savannah's father, Richard Clemens, owns a real estate development company. For the past year, he's been quietly buying properties in the historic district. He pulled out a map of Riverside with properties marked in red. 8 properties circling the mansion's location. He wants to build a luxury hotel, Jack said. But the Historic Preservation Society won't approve demolition of existing properties unless they can prove the entire block is under single ownership. The Whitmore Mansion is the centerpiece. With it, he could claim historical significance for the whole development. Without it, his hotel can't get approved, Mallory finished. So he sent his daughter after Austin. More like he created the opportunity. Richard Clemens hired Austin 6 months ago specifically because he was married to Claire Whitmore. I have emails, Jack pulled out printouts, from Richard to Savannah discussing the mansion problem, and how the husband might be leverage. I read the emails, dated January through March. Richard's words were careful, never explicitly illegal, but the intent was clear. Cultivate a relationship with Austin. Identify his weaknesses. Exploit his financial desperation. Make him believe it's his idea. She seduced him on purpose, Meredith said, her voice hollow. This wasn't an affair. It was a business strategy. Austin was a mark, Jack agreed. A target. Savannah didn't love him, she played him. And he was so desperate to prove he could be successful, to escape the shadow of his failed startup, that he walked right into it. I thought about the Rolex, the expensive shoes, the confidence in Austin's voice this morning. All gifts from Savannah, all calculated to make him feel important. Special. Worthy of stealing a $4.8 million property. How deep does this go? I asked. Jack pulled out another document. I contacted the FBI 3 weeks ago, after you brought me the security footage. They'd already been monitoring Richard Clemens for suspected real estate irregularities. Your case gave them the evidence they needed to move forward. Multiple properties acquired through questionable means. Pressure tactics, forgeries, intimidation of elderly property owners. The mansion was just another acquisition, Mallory said. The biggest one. The showpiece. If he'd gotten it, he'd have established a pattern of being untouchable. Other historic property owners would have caved under pressure. Jack looked at me directly. You stopping this isn't just about your house, Claire. It's about protecting every historic property in Riverside. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I recognized the tone. Can't wait to see you tonight. We're something nice, we're celebrating your generosity. S. Savannah, taunting me through a burner phone. I showed it to Jack. Is this enough? All the evidence, the conspiracy, everything? Agent Poole thinks so. He's getting warrants now. But Claire, Jack's expression turns serious. Once this moves forward tonight, there's no stopping it. Austin will be arrested. Savannah will be arrested. Richard Clemens will probably be arrested. This will be public, messy, and your marriage will be dissected in federal court. My marriage ended the day Austin decided to steal my family's legacy. I stood, suddenly exhausted. How many people are coming to this party? According to the invitation list I intercepted, Mallory said, checking her phone, about 40 people. Riverside's business elite, city council members, the mayor, reporters from the Gazette. Richard wants witnesses, Jack said. He wants the whole town to see his daughter in the Whitmore mansion, establishing social proof that the transfer was legitimate. Then the whole town can watch it fall apart, I said. What time should we arrive? 8 o'clock. Agent Poole and his team will be in position by 7:30. Jack closed the folders, stacking them neatly. Claire, are you sure about this? Once you walk into that party. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Outside Jack's office, the afternoon sun painted Riverside's historic district in golden light. The same light that had fallen on these streets for 150 years, through wars and depressions and the quiet crimes people committed when they thought no one was watching. But someone was always watching. And tonight, the whole world would see. I returned home at 4 o'clock, parking in the carriage house like I'd done for 13 years. The mansion looked the same as always, solid, permanent, waiting. My great-great-grandmother's face watched from the portrait in the foyer as I climbed the stairs to the bedroom I'd shared with Austin. His closet was half empty. He'd been moving things out gradually, I realized. Taking the expensive suits, the designer shoes, leaving behind the ordinary clothes from our early years. Taking the man he wanted to be, leaving behind the man he'd been. I pulled out my phone and called Agent Mark Poole. Mrs. Whitmore. His voice was professional, clipped. Are you still planning to attend the event tonight? I am. I need to know what happens when I get there. You arrive at 8, as invited. Act natural, surprised to be invited, maybe, but willing to be civil. We need them comfortable, celebrating. The moment they start discussing the mansion transfer publicly, acknowledging the fraud in front of witnesses, we move in. How many agents? 12, plus local police as backup. We'll have surveillance teams outside, undercover agents inside posing as caterers and guests. The moment is timed for maximum impact and evidence collection. Maximum impact, I repeated. You mean maximum humiliation. A pause. Mrs. Whitmore, I understand this is personal for you. But this case is bigger than your marriage or your property. Richard Clemens has been operating this scheme for years. Elderly property owners forced out of homes they've owned for generations. Historic buildings demolished for luxury developments. You're the first person with the resources and evidence to stop him. I know. The party tonight is his victory lap. He's invited city officials, media, investors. He wants to normalize what he's done, make it seem like just another real estate deal. We're going to show everyone exactly what kind of business he really runs. After hanging up, I sat on the bed where Austin and I had shared 13 years of marriage. The good years felt distant now, like they'd happened to different people. Maybe they had. My phone rang. Austin. I stared at his name on the screen, debating whether to answer. On the 5th ring, I did. Claire. He sounded stressed, not angry. We need to talk before tonight. I'm listening. Don't come to the party. Please. It's going to be awkward for everyone, and Savannah's father is bringing important people. Business contacts, city officials. Why would it be awkward, Austin? It's just a party. Because, he stopped, recalibrated. Because we're celebrating the sale. The new beginning. It won't be comfortable for you to watch. The sale of what? Silence. He was trying to figure out if this was a trap. The mansion. You know that. Do I? I don't remember selling anything. Claire, don't do this. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The papers are filed, the deal is done. Coming tonight will only embarrass you. Embarrass me, I repeated slowly. That's what you're worried about? I'm trying to be considerate. Savannah wanted to invite you, she thought it would be classy, show there's no hard feelings. But I know you, Claire. You're going to make a scene, try to cause problems. I've never made a scene in my life. That's my point. You're too passive, too willing to just accept things. But tonight, with everyone watching, I'm afraid you'll finally snap. Do something you'll regret. The irony was almost beautiful. He was afraid I'd embarrass myself by revealing his fraud, never imagining that federal agents were already preparing to arrest him. What if I promised to behave? I asked. No scene, no drama. Just a civilized appearance to show there's no animosity. You do that? Austin, we were married for 13 years. We can be adults about this. Another pause. I could hear Savannah in the background, her voice sharp. Is she coming or not? The photographer needs to know for the setup. She says she'll behave, Austin said, phone muffled. Then let her come. It'll look better for the story. The gracious ex-wife supporting new beginnings. Very evolved. Claire. Austin was back. Okay. Come. 8 o'clock. But please, for both our sakes, just be gracious. Don't fight this. I won't fight anything, I said honestly. I'll let the truth speak for itself. After he hung up, I sat in the silence of my bedroom, in my house, on my family's land. Through the window, I could see the garden where we'd married, where my mother had married my father, where my grandmother had married my grandfather. 13 decades of Whitmore women protecting this place. I wasn't going to be the one who lost it. At 6 o'clock, Mallory arrived with a garment bag. If you're going to watch your husband get arrested, you're doing it in style. She'd brought a dress, deep emerald silk, elegant but not flashy. Expensive enough to show I wasn't defeated, simple enough to show I wasn't trying too hard. My testimony outfit, I said, managing a smile. Your victory outfit, she corrected. Meredith arrived at 7, looking pale but determined. She'd spent the afternoon with her parents, telling them everything. Dad's devastated, she said. Mom keeps saying there must be some mistake. But they're not coming tonight. They can't watch Austin get arrested. But you can. Someone from his family needs to be there. Someone who knows the truth. She touched the pearl necklace at her throat, her grandmother's, a match to my own family heirlooms. And someone needs to stand with you. At 7:30, we climbed into Mallory's car. My hands were steady as I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. Same face, same eyes. But something had changed over these 3 weeks. Something hardened and clarified. Last chance to back out, Mallory said, starting the engine. Drive. The route to Savannah's penthouse took us through downtown Riverside, past the historic buildings Richard Clemens wanted to demolish. Past the Riverside Historical Society where I'd worked for 8 years, preserving the town's heritage. Past the park where Austin had proposed, where I'd believed in forever. That woman seemed like a stranger now. The penthouse occupied the top floor of the newest luxury building in Riverside, glass and steel that looked out of place among the historic architecture. Exactly the kind of development Richard Clemens specialized in. Modern. Expensive. Soulless. We rode the elevator in silence, listening to smooth jazz that did nothing to calm my racing heart. At the penthouse level, the doors opened to reveal a private hallway, plush carpet, a single door at the end marked PH. Through the door, I could hear music, laughter, the sound of celebration. Mallory squeezed my hand. Ready? I thought about my great-great-grandmother Eleanor, arriving at an empty plot of land in 1886 with railroad money and a vision. Building something meant to last. Something worth protecting. Ready, I said. And we walked toward the sound of my husband celebrating the theft he thought he'd gotten away with. The door opened before we could knock. A server in black and white, holding a tray of champagne flutes, gestured us inside with professional warmth. Welcome. Please, help yourselves. The penthouse was everything the mansion wasn't. Modern. Minimal. All sharp angles and cold surfaces. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Riverside's downtown, the historic district reduced to quaint rooftops and church spires far below. 40 people filled the space. I recognized most of them, Riverside's business elite, city council members, the mayor's chief of staff. People I'd served on charity boards with, who'd attended dinners at the mansion, who'd smiled to my face while judging my devotion to old things. Savannah spotted us immediately. She wore white, of course she did, a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair was styled in waves, her makeup flawless. She looked like a bride at her own wedding. Claire. She glided over, arms outstretched like we were old friends. I'm so glad you came. It takes real grace to celebrate someone else's happiness. Up close, I could see my grandmother's pearl earrings in her ears. The ones that had been stolen during a break-in last year. The ones Austin had reported to insurance, collecting $15,000 for their loss. Beautiful earrings, I said. Her hand went to them instinctively, a flicker of something, guilt? Triumph, crossing her face. Anniversary gift from Austin. 3 months. He has exquisite taste. 3 months. While we were still married. While I was sleeping in our bed, unaware. Austin appeared from the crowd, a champagne flute in his hand, his face flushed. He'd been drinking for a while, I realized. Celebrating or steadying his nerves? Claire. He kissed my cheek like we were civilized, like he hadn't tried to steal my family's legacy that morning. You came. You invited me. Savannah invited you. I thought you'd be too, he searched for the word. Too hurt to attend. I'm stronger than you think. Something passed across his face. Doubt, maybe. Or recognition that he'd underestimated me, the way he'd been underestimating me for 6 months. Come, let me introduce you to some people. Savannah linked her arm through mine, proprietary. Leading me through the crowd like a prize. Everyone's dying to meet the woman gracious enough to let go without a fight. Let go. As if the mansion was a balloon string I'd simply released. Richard Clemens stood by the windows, holding court with the mayor and 3 city council members. He was 60-something, silver-haired and tan, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. When he saw us approaching, his smile was all teeth. The famous Claire Whitmore. He extended his hand. Richard Clemens. I've heard so much about you. I'm sure you have. I shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the expensive watch, the ring that probably indicated some exclusive club membership. I want you to know, he said, his voice carrying to the nearby guests, that we plan to honor the mansion's history. Preserve its legacy even as we integrate it into the new Riverside development. New development? A luxury hotel and conference center. The mansion as the centerpiece, a living museum, if you will. Your family's legacy preserved for generations. He made it sound noble, generous. Like he was doing me a favor. Integrated, I repeated. Does that mean you own the surrounding properties too? His smile didn't waver. Enough to make the project viable. The mansion was the final piece. Thanks to Austin and Savannah's, he paused delicately, arrangement, we can move forward with bringing jobs and economic growth to Riverside. The mayor nodded enthusiastically. The city is thrilled about the development. Property values in the historic district will increase significantly. Right before you demolish it, Meredith said quietly beside me. Richard's eyes sharpened, finally noticing her. Meredith, isn't it? Austin's sister. I didn't realize you'd be joining us. Wouldn't miss it, she said, her voice steady despite her pale face. A server approached Richard with a whispered message. He excused himself, moving toward the kitchen area where I glimpsed other servers, and faces I recognized. Agent Poole's team, positioned throughout the penthouse like chess pieces. Austin appeared at my elbow, nervous energy radiating from him. "You're being very quiet." "Just observing." "Observing what?" "How many people you've involved in this." I gestured around the room. "The mayor, city officials, investors." "That's a lot of witnesses, Austin." "Witnesses to a legitimate business transaction." But his voice wavered slightly. Savannah clinked a knife against her champagne glass, the sound cutting through conversation. The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. She stood in the center of the space, Austin beside her, both of them backlit by the city lights beyond. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice carrying. "Tonight is about new beginnings. About the future of Riverside. About preserving history while embracing progress." My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from Agent Poole, recording everything. "Let her talk." "As many of you know," Savannah continued, "the Whitmore mansion has been in Claire's family for over a century. It's a beautiful property, full of history. But Claire has generously agreed to pass that legacy to someone who can truly appreciate it, who can ensure it becomes part of something bigger than one family's sentiment." Generous. As if I'd had a choice. "Austin and I are honored to be the new stewards of this historic property." She raised her glass. "To Claire, for understanding that sometimes we have to let go of the past to make room for the future." The room raised their glasses. I watched 40 people toast my supposed generosity, my gracious surrender. None of them knew they were celebrating fraud. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying in the moment after the toast, "I'd like to say something." Austin's face went white. Savannah's smile froze. "Please," Richard Clemens said smoothly, gesturing for me to join them in the center. "We'd love to hear from you." The crowd parted as I walked forward. Mallory and Meredith stayed by the windows, positioned like anchors. I could feel Agent Poole watching from his position near the kitchen, waiting. I stood between Austin and Savannah, looking out at the faces of Riverside's elite. People who'd known my family for generations. People who'd accepted the mansion's theft without question because it came wrapped in pretty words about progress and letting go. When my great-great-grandmother built the Whitmore mansion in 1886, I began, my voice steady, she made her daughters promise something. That the house would pass through the female line. That it would never be sold to strangers. That it would remain a Whitmore legacy, protected by Whitmore women. Austin shifted beside me. Savannah's smile had become fixed, plastic. "That mansion represents 138 years of my family's history. For generations of women who protected it through wars, depressions, and every challenge this country faced." I paused, looking directly at Richard Clemens. "And you thought you could steal it for $1. The room went silent. "Claire," Austin started. "Let me finish." I pulled out my phone, opened the video file. "Because everyone here should see exactly what they're celebrating." I pressed play. Austin's voice filled the penthouse. "I don't care if it's illegal, Savannah. I've been married to her for 13 years. I've earned this house." The video played on my phone, but in the sudden silence, every word carried. Austin's voice, conspiring with Savannah. Their laughter as they mocked my sentimentality. The kiss in front of my great-great-grandmother's portrait. "Turn that off," Richard Clemens said sharply. "Why?" I asked. "I thought we were celebrating transparency. New beginnings. Truth." I swiped to the next video. Austin practicing my signature, over and over, the concentration on his face visible to everyone in the room. A city council member gasped. The mayor's chief of staff pulled out her phone. "This is a private matter," Austin started. "Is it?" I looked at the crowd. "How many of you invested in Richard Clemens's hotel development based on his promise that he owned the Whitmore mansion? How many of you approved zoning changes, granted permits, allocated city resources? Silence. Guilty silence. Because here's the thing about that sale you're all celebrating. I pulled out the deed from my clutch, the real deed, with Jack Dunphy's office seal. The Whitmore mansion is held in an irrevocable trust. It legally cannot be sold, transferred, or used as collateral. Any sale without the trustees' explicit notarized consent is automatically void. That's not. Savannah's voice climbed higher. Austin said the trust was just a formality, that we could work around it. Work around it, I repeated. You mean commit fraud? Richard Clemens stepped forward, his smooth facade cracking. Young lady, I don't know what you think you're proving here, but this is a legitimate business transaction. Is it? A new voice came from the kitchen entrance. Agent Mark Poole stepped forward, his FBI credentials held high, shield gleaming under the penthouse lights. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit theft, and about 15 other federal crimes. The room erupted in gasps. Agent Poole stepped out from behind the catering station. 5 more agents emerged simultaneously, from the bar, the photographer's position, even among the guests. The servers weren't servers. The couple by the window weren't celebrating. Even the valet outside was FBI. Austin Finbar, Agent Poole continued, moving toward us, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery of legal documents. 2 agents flanked Austin. He looked at me, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Claire, please. We can fix this. I'll give it back, You can't give back what you never had, I said quietly. Savannah Clemens, Agent Poole turned to her, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and theft of property valued over $1 million. This is insane. Savannah's champagne glass fell, shattering on the white marble floor. Red wine spread like blood. Daddy, do something. But Richard Clemens was already backing toward the elevator, his lawyer instincts kicking in. I had no knowledge of any illegal activity. My daughter's relationship with Mr. Finbar was personal, not. Richard Clemens, a female agent, stepped into his path. You're also under arrest. We have 18 months of documentation showing a pattern of real estate fraud, including forged documents, intimidation of elderly property owners, and conspiracy to commit theft across multiple properties. You can't prove, Richard started. We can prove everything. Agent Poole gestured, and another agent brought forward boxes of files. Mrs. Whitmore's case led us to 15 other victims. Elderly homeowners who'd sold their properties for suspiciously low amounts. Properties that coincidentally blocked your various developments. Properties where the signatures were forged and the sales pushed through before anyone could investigate. The mayor had gone pale. Richard, you told me those acquisitions were all voluntary. They were. These people are lying, trying to stop progress. Progress. I laughed, and it came out harder than I intended. You call stealing people's homes progress? Savannah lunged at me, her carefully composed mask finally cracking. You ruined everything. Austin loved me, we were going to build something beautiful. You were going to build it with stolen property, Meredith said, stepping forward. She held up her phone, showing the text messages Austin had sent her. He didn't love you, Savannah. He loved what you promised him. Money, status, success. You played him, and he was too desperate to see it. That's not true. But Savannah's voice cracked. She turned to Austin, seeking confirmation, support, something. Austin wouldn't meet her eyes. He was staring at the handcuffs the agents were holding, reality finally crashing through whatever fantasy he'd been living in. Mr. Finbar, Agent Poole said, stepping closer, you have the right to remain silent. I want to make a deal. Austin's voice was barely a whisper. I'll tell you everything. How Richard approached me, what he promised, how we planned it. Everything. Just please. Austin. Richard snarled. Don't say another word without a lawyer. You used me. Austin turned on him, anger finally breaking through. You sent your daughter to seduce me, told me it would be easy, that Claire was too weak to fight back. You said the trust didn't matter, that you had judges who would rule in our favor. Shut up. Savannah screamed. But Austin kept talking, words tumbling out like a confession he'd been holding back for months. About Richard's plan to demolish the historic district. About the kickbacks promised to city officials. About the investors who'd been guaranteed returns based on property Richard didn't actually own. Agent Poole gestured to another agent, who started recording. Keep talking, Mr. Finbar. Everything you say is evidence, but cooperation will be noted. The mayor's chief of staff was already heading for the elevator. 3 city council members followed, their faces carefully neutral. Investors clustered in corners, probably calculating how much money they were about to lose. Mallory appeared at my side, her hand on my elbow. You okay? I watched Austin being handcuffed, still talking, desperate to save himself by burning everyone else. Watched Savannah crying, her white dress stained with spilled wine, her perfect party destroyed. Watched Richard Clemens finally silent, his expensive suit and smooth words useless against handcuffs and Miranda rights. Yeah, I said. I'm okay. Meredith joined us, her face wet with tears. He's still my brother. Even after everything, watching him get arrested. I know, I said, taking her hand. But he did this. He chose this. The agents were leading them out now, one by one. Austin looked back at me as they reached the elevator, his face desperate. Claire, I'm sorry. I was stupid, I was desperate, I never meant. Yes, you did, I said simply. You meant every bit of it. You just never expected to face consequences. The elevator doors closed on his face. The penthouse, so full of celebration minutes ago, now held only stunned guests and federal agents cataloging evidence. Champagne glasses abandoned mid-toast. Appetizers untouched. The photographer's professional lights still set up for photos that would never be taken. Agent Poole approached me, his expression professional but not unkind. We'll need you to come to the federal building tomorrow for a formal statement. Probably several times over the next few weeks as we build the case. I'll be there. What you did tonight, recording everything, gathering evidence, staying calm while they incriminated themselves, he paused. Most people couldn't have done that. Most people, I said, looking out at the city lights beyond the windows, at Riverside's historic district spread out below us, didn't have 138 years of family legacy to protect. He nodded, understanding. The mansion is legally yours. Always was. The trust documents are ironclad. I know. As we left the penthouse, I took one last look at the space where my husband had celebrated stealing my life. The modern furniture, the expensive art, the view that reduced history to something small and distant. It was everything I never wanted. The historic district, my grandmother's library, the weight of legacy, those were worth fighting for. And I'd won. The federal courthouse in downtown Boston was all marble and authority, the kind of building designed to make you feel the weight of law and consequence. I'd been here 4 times in 3 weeks, depositions, evidence review, witness preparation. Today was the preliminary hearing. Jack Dunphy sat beside me on the polished wooden bench, his briefcase full of documents we'd spent years accumulating without knowing it. Mallory was on my other side, present as both friend and legal counsel. Meredith sat 3 rows back, her parents beside her, all of them looking like they'd aged years in 3 weeks. Austin entered first, flanked by his public defender. He couldn't afford private counsel anymore, not with his accounts frozen pending the fraud investigation. He wore a gray suit that hung loose on him, like he'd lost weight. His eyes found mine across the courtroom, then slid away. Savannah came next, her designer wardrobe replaced by a conservative navy dress that screamed, "My lawyer dressed me." Her father's legal team had cut her loose immediately, telling her to take a plea deal and minimize her involvement. She'd fired 3 lawyers already, refusing to accept that her white dress party had become a federal case. Richard Clemens entered last, surrounded by 4 attorneys in expensive suits. He looked diminished somehow, despite the legal armor. The silver hair that had seemed distinguished now looked merely old. The tan had faded during 3 weeks of house arrest. "All rise," the bailiff called. The Honorable Judge Patricia Hawthorne presiding. Judge Hawthorne was 60-something, with steel-gray hair and the reputation of someone who'd seen every scheme the human mind could devise. She settled into her chair with the weight of 30 years on the bench, surveying the courtroom with sharp eyes. "Let's begin," she said. United States vs. Austin Finbar, Savannah Clemens, and Richard Clemens. Charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and theft of property valued over $1 million. Assistant Attorney Sophia Chen stood, her presentation precise and devastating. "Your Honor, the government will demonstrate a conspiracy spanning 6 months, involving multiple victims, forged documents, and a pattern of real estate fraud targeting historic properties throughout Riverside." She presented evidence methodically. The security footage from my mansion, showing Austin practicing my signature. The emails between Richard and Savannah discussing the mansion problem. The forged deed with its laughable signature. The notary in Hartford who'd been paid $500 cash to stamp documents without verifying identity. The defendants believed Mrs. Whitmore would be too sentimental, too passive, too trusting to fight back, Sophia said, her voice carrying through the courtroom. They underestimated her entirely. Then came the other victims. Elderly homeowners Richard had targeted over 18 months. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, 83, who'd sold her Victorian home for $100. Mr. James Wu, 76, whose family's restaurant property had been transferred through forged documents while he was in the hospital with pneumonia. Sarah and David Morrison, who'd lost their historic inn to a sale they never authorized. Each testimony was devastating. Each story followed the same pattern: Richard Clemens identifying properties he wanted, finding vulnerabilities in the owners, exploiting those weaknesses through forgery, intimidation, or outright fraud. 15 properties, Sophia said, displaying a map of Riverside. 15 families. Over $12 million in stolen real estate, all to clear land for developments that would have destroyed Riverside's historic character forever. Austin's attorney called him to testify. He'd taken a plea deal, agreeing to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. He looked small in the witness box, diminished. "Mr. Finbar," his attorney began, "please tell the court how you became involved in this conspiracy." Austin's voice was barely audible. "Richard Clemens approached me 6 months ago. He knew about my failed startup, knew I was desperate. He said his daughter was attracted to me, that maybe we could help each other." "Help how?" "He wanted the Whitmore mansion. Said it was the key to his development project. If I could get Claire to sell it, or transfer it, he'd give me a position in his company. Executive vice president. 6-figure salary. Everything I'd failed to achieve on my own." "And Savannah Clemens?" Austin's voice cracked. "She was part of the plan. Richard told her to pursue me, to make me feel important. Special. Like I deserved more than what I had." Savannah's gasp was audible across the courtroom. "That's not true. I loved you." "Ms. Clemens, you'll have your chance to testify," Judge Hawthorne said sharply. Austin continued, words tumbling out. "I knew it was wrong. Knew Claire would never agree to sell. But Richard said the trust didn't matter, that he had connections in the county clerk's office, judges who owed him favors. He said by the time anyone questioned it, the property would be transferred and Claire would be too defeated to fight." "Did you love your wife, Mr. Finbar?" The courtroom went silent. Austin stared at his hands, at the wedding ring he still wore despite everything. "I don't know anymore. Maybe I did once. But somewhere along the way, I started resenting her. Resenting that she had this legacy, this history, this house that meant more to her than I did." "The house meant more to her than you did," Sophia Chen repeated, standing for cross-examination, "or you made yourself smaller than your greed." Austin had no answer. Savannah testified next, her story different from Austin's. She claimed ignorance of the larger conspiracy, said she'd genuinely fallen in love with Austin, believed the mansion sale was legitimate. Miss Clemens, Sophia held up printed emails. You wrote to your father, Austin is completely manipulated. He'll do whatever I suggest. The mansion will be ours within 3 months. Does that sound like love? That was taken out of context. You also wrote, she's so pathetic, working at that historical society like preserving dead people's stuff matters. Once we have the house, I'm burning every book in that dusty library. Context. Savannah's carefully constructed innocence crumbled. Fine. Yes, it was a plan. Yes, my father wanted the property. But Austin knew what he was doing. He wanted out of his pathetic marriage, wanted money and status and everything she couldn't give him. So you provided those things as bait, Sophia said. The Rolex, the expensive dinners, the promise of a better life. All to manipulate a desperate man into committing federal crimes. He wanted to commit them. Savannah's voice rose. I just gave him the opportunity. Judge Hawthorne's gavel fell. Miss Clemens, I'd suggest you stop testifying against yourself. But the damage was done. Savannah had admitted to conspiracy, manipulation, and knowledge of the fraud. Richard Clemens's testimony was smoother, more calculated. His attorneys had prepared him well. He claimed he'd trusted his daughter's relationship with Austin was genuine. Said he believed the mansion sale was legitimate. Expressed shock at discovering the forgery. Mr. Clemens, Sophia produced more evidence. You emailed your daughter saying, if the Whitmore woman won't sell voluntarily, we'll need to be creative. I have a notary in Hartford who doesn't ask questions. How does that reflect your shock at the forgery? Richard's expensive attorneys objected, called for context, tried to suppress the evidence. But Judge Hawthorne had seen enough. I'm denying the motion to suppress, she said. These emails clearly show premeditation and conspiracy at the highest level. Finally, Sophia called me to testify. I walked to the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The truth. It felt almost anticlimactic after 3 weeks of revelations. Mrs. Whitmore, Sophia began gently, why did you install security cameras in your home? Because my husband started talking about selling the mansion 6 months ago. He became fixated on it after his startup failed. I wanted to protect my family's legacy, so I documented everything. Did you love your husband? The same question they'd asked Austin. I looked at him across the courtroom. This man I'd married 13 years ago in my grandmother's garden. Yes, I said. Until the day he chose to steal from me rather than talk to me. That's when I realized I'd been loving a version of him that maybe never existed. The sentencing came swiftly. Austin, 18 months in federal prison for conspiracy and fraud. Savannah, 2 years for conspiracy, identity theft, and obstruction. Richard Clemens, 5 years for orchestrating a multi-property fraud scheme that had destroyed 15 families' legacies. The judge's gavel fell with finality. I stood on the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun warm on my face, while reporters clustered around with microphones and cameras. Mrs. Whitmore, how do you feel about the sentencing? Relieved, I said simply. Justice was served. Do you have any message for other victims of property fraud? I thought about Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Wu, the Morrisons, all the families Richard Clemens had targeted. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And never let anyone make you feel foolish for protecting what's yours. What about your husband? Any final words for Austin Finbar? I looked directly at the camera. He stopped being my husband the day he forged my signature. I hope he uses his time in prison to figure out who he wants to be when greed isn't making his decisions. Mallory touched my elbow, signaling we should go, but one more reporter called out, the Whitmore mansion, what will you do with it now? I smiled for the first time in weeks. Keep it in my family, exactly as it was meant to be. And open the library to the public twice a week. History should be shared, not stolen. The drive back to Riverside took 90 minutes. Mallory drove while I stared out the window, watching Boston's urban sprawl give way to smaller towns, then to the rolling hills and historic architecture of Riverside. "You okay?" Mallory asked as we crossed into town. "I think so. It feels surreal. 3 weeks ago, Austin was trying to steal my house. Now he's going to federal prison. He earned every day of that sentence." "I know. It's just," I struggled for words. 13 years of marriage, and it ended with me watching him get handcuffed. That's not how I imagined my life going. "None of us imagined betrayal," Mallory said quietly. "That's what makes it betrayal." As we drove through downtown Riverside, I noticed something different. Sterling's Cafe had a sign in the window, "Welcome home, Claire. Coffee on us." The bookstore next door displayed my grandmother's memoir in the front window with a handwritten note, "Local hero preserves history." "What is this?" I asked. Mallory smiled. "The town's been talking. Once the news broke about Richard Clemens's fraud scheme, people started realizing how many families he'd targeted. You became the woman who stopped him." More signs appeared as we drove. Thompson's Market, proud to serve the Whitmore family. The Historical Society had hung a banner, "Integrity preserves history." Even the mayor's office displayed a statement about strengthening property fraud protections. When we reached the mansion's driveway, I gasped. The circular drive was lined with cars. People stood on my lawn, at least 50 of them, holding signs and flowers. "What? You didn't think you'd come home to an empty house, did you?" Meredith appeared at my car door as Mallory parked. "The whole town wanted to welcome you back." I stepped out to applause. Mrs. Patterson from the feed store, where this had all started. Derek Morrison from Greenfield Market. Jack Dunphy with his briefcase, probably full of documents even now. Tom Henderson and his wife Martha. Even the mayor, looking slightly uncomfortable but present. "We owed you an apology," Mrs. Patterson said, stepping forward. Her elderly hands held a casserole dish. "Some of us believed Austin's story about you having a breakdown. We should have known better. Should have trusted the woman we've known all your life over a man who'd only been here 13 years. You weren't the only one he fooled," I said gently. "But we should have asked your side." She pressed the casserole into my hands. "Tuna noodle. Your grandmother's recipe. I remember her making it when your mother passed." One by one, people approached. Some with food, some with flowers, some just with apologies and support. Mr. Wu, the restaurant owner Richard had defrauded, brought spring rolls. "You saved my restaurant," he said, tears in his eyes. They were going to demolish it. Now they can't. Sarah Morrison brought wine. "The inn is safe because of you. Because you fought when we'd already given up." The mayor cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore, Claire, the city council voted this morning. We're implementing new property transfer protections. Mandatory verification periods, independent notary verification, trustee notification for any properties held in trust. We're calling it the Whitmore Protection Act." Something cracked in my chest. "Not breaking, opening." "Thank you. It should have existed already," he said. "We failed 15 families because we made it too easy for men like Richard Clemens to operate. That ends now." As the sun set, people began to leave, but not before filling my kitchen with enough food for a month. Mallory and Meredith stayed, helping me organize the casseroles and flowers and cards. "Listen to this one," Meredith said, reading a card. "From the Riverside Garden Club, thank you for showing us that strong women don't make scenes, they make history." That's actually beautiful. My phone buzzed. An email from the Historical Society's board. Subject, position available. I opened it, scanning quickly. They're offering me the director position. Double the salary, full control over programming, and they want to start a property preservation fund in my grandmother's name. "Are you going to take it?" Mallory asked. I looked around my kitchen, my grandmother's kitchen, my mother's kitchen, mine. For generations of Whitmore women had made decisions at this table. Had protected this house through wars and depressions and schemes by men who thought women's legacies could be stolen. Yes, I said. I'm going to take it. And I'm going to make sure no one else in Riverside loses their family's legacy the way Richard Clemens tried to take mine. That night, after everyone left, I walked through the mansion alone. The library where Austin had practiced forging my signature. The bedroom we'd shared for 13 years. The office where I discovered his betrayal. The garden where we'd married under a sky full of promises. Each room held memories, good ones and terrible ones mixed together like ingredients in a recipe I'd never wanted to make. But the house itself was unchanged. The books still lined the shelves. The portraits still watched from the walls. The grandfather clock still kept time the way it had for over a century. Austin had tried to steal this, but he'd failed to understand what it really was. Not just bricks and mortar. Not just real estate value. It was continuity. Legacy. The physical proof that my family had existed, had mattered, had built something meant to last. You couldn't forge that. You couldn't sell it for $1. And you definitely couldn't steal it from a woman who knew exactly what she was protecting. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, just mine now, not ours, and opened the window. Cool night air carried the scent of the garden below, roses my grandmother had planted 40 years ago, still blooming. In the distance, I could see Riverside's lights twinkling against the darkness. 15 families sleeping safely in homes that Richard Clemens had tried to steal. A town implementing protections because one woman had refused to be a victim. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. Claire, it's Austin. Using someone else's phone. I know you won't respond, but I needed to say, I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better than what I became. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some apologies come too late. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. I turned off my phone, climbed into bed, my bed, in my house, on my family's land, and for the first time in 6 months, I slept soundly through the night. I woke at 6:30 without an alarm, sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows I'd finally redecorated. The curtains were new, cream linen instead of the heavy drapes Austin had preferred. The walls were painted a soft sage green, a color my grandmother had used in her own bedroom decades ago. The house felt different now. Lighter somehow, like it had been holding its breath for 6 months and could finally exhale. Downstairs, coffee brewed automatically, filling the kitchen with the smell of morning routine. I'd established new patterns over the past 6 months. No more checking security cameras obsessively. No more jumping at unexpected sounds. The mansion was mine again, had always been mine, but now it felt that way. Through the window, I could see the garden in full spring bloom. Tulips my grandmother had planted, daffodils I'd added, and new rose bushes I'd installed last month. Life continuing, growing, flourishing despite the attempted theft. My phone buzzed with the day's schedule. 9 o'clock, Historical Society Board meeting. Noon, lunch with the architect reviewing plans for the public library addition. 3 o'clock, interview with a journalist writing about property fraud prevention legislation. The Whitmore Protection Act had passed the state legislature 2 months ago. Mandatory waiting periods for property transfers. Independent verification of signatures. Automatic notification to trustees for any trust-held properties. Other states were considering similar legislation. 15 families had their properties returned. Richard Clemens had been ordered to pay $3.2 million in restitution, bankrupting his development company. His luxury buildings downtown stood half-finished, monuments to the empire he'd tried to build on stolen land. A knock at the kitchen door. Meredith entered without waiting for an answer, carrying pastries from the new bakery downtown and wearing her hospital scrubs. Morning shift? I asked, pouring her coffee. Night shift just ended. Figured I'd stop by before heading home. She bit into a croissant, her exhaustion evident. Mom called last night. Asked if I'd heard from Austin. I stiffened slightly. Have you? He writes every week. From prison. Letters about how he's taking classes, reading philosophy, finding himself. She shook her head. Finding himself. Like he was lost instead of criminal. Are you going to visit him? I don't know. He's still my brother. But every time I think about forgiving him, I remember watching you on those courthouse steps, answering questions about how your husband tried to steal your family's legacy. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. How do you forgive someone for that? I don't know if you do, I said honestly. I think maybe you just move forward without them. Have you? She asked. Moved forward? I thought about the question. 6 months ago, my identity had been wrapped up in being Austin's wife. Claire Finbar, married to the ambitious financial consultant. Claire, who made excuses for his moods and supported his dreams and believed in second chances. Now I was just Claire Whitmore. Director of the Riverside Historical Society. Advocate for property fraud prevention. Guardian of a 138-year-old mansion and the legacy it represented. Yeah, I said. I think I have. After Meredith left for home and sleep, I walked through the mansion's rooms, seeing them with new eyes. The library was different now, open to the public twice a week, filled with local students doing research and elderly residents reading in the chairs my grandmother had upholstered. Community members touching history because I'd chosen to share it instead of hoard it. The office was mine alone now. My desk, my files, my work. No more divided space, no more accommodating someone else's ambitions at the expense of my own. The bedroom upstairs held no ghosts. Just memories, filed away like old photographs. Important once, but no longer defining. My phone rang. Jack Dunphy. Claire, wanted to give you a heads up. The divorce is final. Papers were filed this morning. Final. 13 years of marriage, 6 months of legal proceedings, reduced to stamped documents and court seals. Thank you, Jack. How are you feeling? I walked to the window, looking out at the gardens, the driveway, the iron gates with the Whitmore name wrought into them. Relieved. Free. Good. That's good. He paused. Your grandmother would be proud of you. The way you fought for this place, for your family's legacy. That took courage. After hanging up, I found myself in the library, standing in front of my great-great-grandmother Eleanor's portrait. She'd built this house in 1886 with railroad money and vision. Had raised children here, survived her husband's death, protected this property through economic depressions and world wars. I kept the promise, I told her painted face. The house stays with us. The legacy continues. A knock at the front door pulled me from reflection. I opened it to find a young woman, maybe 25, holding a clipboard and looking nervous. Mrs. Whitmore? She flushed. Sorry, I read about your case and I wasn't sure what to call you. Claire is fine. Can I help you? I'm Blythe Morrison. Sarah and David Morrison's daughter. They owned the inn that Richard Clemens tried to steal. Her words rushed together. I'm in law school now. Family law and property rights. Because of what happened to my parents, because of what you did to stop it. I was wondering, the Historical Society is looking for summer interns, and I thought. You want to intern with us? I want to learn how to protect people's legacies. How to fight for what matters. How to be, she stopped, embarrassed. How to be like you, I guess. I looked at this young woman, her earnestness and determination reminding me of myself at 25, using my grandmother's insurance money to work at the Historical Society, learning to value history over profit. The position's yours, I said. Start Monday. Her face lit up. Really? Just like that? Just like that. But Blythe? It's not about being like me. It's about being someone who understands that some things are worth protecting, no matter the cost. After she left, practically floating down the driveway, I returned to the library. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes and highlighting the spines of thousands of books. For generations of Whitmore women had built this collection. Now it would help build the next generation. My laptop dinged with an email notification. The subject line made me smile: Property Fraud Prevention Speaking Invitation, Boston College Law. They wanted me to speak to law students about my case. About documentation, trust structures, and protecting vulnerable property owners. About what happens when someone underestimates a quiet woman's strength. I accepted the invitation. That evening, I sat in the garden with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over land that had been in my family for 138 years. Land that would stay in my family for 138 more, if I had anything to say about it. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from a number I didn't recognize, but a name I knew: Austin's prison number. Claire, I heard the divorce is final. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know, I'm different now. Prison changes you. When I get out in 10 months, I'd like to talk. To apologize properly. To maybe. I didn't read the rest. Just deleted the message and blocked the number. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Some chapters, once finished, don't need epilogues. I was writing new chapters now. Better ones. Chapters where I was the protagonist of my own story, not a supporting character in someone else's fraud. The mansion stood behind me, solid and permanent, lights glowing in windows that had witnessed generations of life. My great-great-grandmother had built it. My grandmother had protected it. My mother had loved it. And I had fought for it. Now I would share it. Because that's what legacy really means, not hoarding history, but passing it forward. Not building walls, but opening doors. Not protecting out of fear, but preserving with purpose. The wine was good. The sunset was beautiful. The air smelled like roses and possibility. And for the first time in 13 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, home, alone, and completely whole. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.